Hey everyone, welcome to our YouTube channel, DevOps Motivation. And today we have an interesting topic, which is on Kubernetes interview questions. Since Kubernetes is a vast topic, I have split this series into multiple parts. So in today's part, we'll see what it holds. So before diving into the interview questions, let's see some of the fun facts about Kubernetes. So Kubernetes, the word itself, it is originating from ancient Greek, which means helmsman or pilot. Helmsman is nothing but who um, steers the boat or a ship. Similarly, in case of airplane or craft, it is going to be pilot. And Kubernetes, it is also called K8s. So that's the abbreviation. And it is nothing but between K and S, there are 8 letters. So that's what it means. So Kubernetes as a project, it is originally designed by Google and now it is maintained by Cloud Native Computing Foundation. So the initial release, it was 9 years ago, and the latest stable release is 1.28.3. So this is the logo of Kubernetes. And let's start with the questions. So first question being, what is Kubernetes and why organizations are using it? So Kubernetes is an open source system that provides users with the ability to manage, scale, and deploy containerized applications. So if we want to sum it up in one word, it is a container orchestration tool. And to understand what Kubernetes is good for, let's take a look at some examples. You would like to run a certain application in a container on multiple different locations and sync the changes across all of them, no matter where they run. And performing updates and changes across hundreds of containers, handle cases where the current load requires to scale up. So to visualize it diagrammatically, so if you take the containers, so this is Kubernetes. It helps to orchestrate all the containers. When and why not to use Kubernetes? So we saw like where to use Kubernetes. Now, why not to use Kubernetes? So if a team which has low level infrastructure or bare metals, then like Kubernetes is not something the company wants or the organization wants. And if say suppose it is a small team, less than 20 engineers, and there are like only dozens of containers, then Kubernetes might become an overkill. So still they can manage the benefits of Kubernetes, but managing Kubernetes itself will be a daunting task. So using Kubernetes itself, it depends on the use case. So we need to analyze the use case and then suggest Kubernetes for the adoption. Coming to the next question, what are some of the Kubernetes features? So self-healing, Kubernetes uses health checks to monitor containers and run certain actions upon failure or other type of events like restarting the container. And load balancing, like it is nothing but splitting the traffic across the applications to the pods. Operators, Kubernetes packaged application that can use the API of the cluster to update its state and trigger actions based on the events and application state changes. Next is automated rollout. So via Kubernetes, we can gradually roll out the updates to the application and also roll back in case anything goes wrong. Scaling, scaling is nothing but we can horizontally scale or vertically scale based on the custom defined criteria. Secret management is also there, wherein users can store their username, password, service endpoint in a private way. So this is another visual representation defining the features. And coming to the next question, what are Kubernetes objects? So pod, service, replication controller, replica set, daemon set, namespace, config map. So these are some important objects straight out of the bat, we can say. But there are like multiple other objects in Kubernetes. So it can be used based on the requirement. Coming to the next question, What fields are mandatory with Kubernetes objects? So metadata, kind, and API version is mandatory. So this is a example Kubernetes manifest file. And here we can see API version being app/v1 and the kind being deployment, and metadata, we are giving the name for the particular application. So these are the mandatory fields that is required in Kubernetes object. Coming to the next question, what is kubectl? Or it can also be pronounced as kubectl. So kubectl is the Kubernetes command line tool that allows you to run commands against Kubernetes clusters. For example, you can use kubectl to deploy application, inspect and manage cluster resources, and view logs. So in this diagram, we can see kubectl being installed as a command line tool. And on the right side, we have Kubernetes and Kubernetes API exposed. So via HTTP protocol, the tool communicates with the API and receives the response. So this is the simple representation. Coming to the next question, what Kubernetes object do you usually use when deploying applications in Kubernetes? So deployment creates the pod and watches them. Service, it routes traffic to the pods internally, and ingress routes traffic from outside to the cluster. Why there is no such command in Kubernetes? And this is the command kubectl get containers. So this is an interesting question because container is not a Kubernetes object. So if we come from a Docker background, we'll be giving Docker commands to list the containers. But in Kubernetes, there is no object called containers. So the smallest object, it is a pod. In a single pod, you can find one or more containers. So that's something to remember. Coming to the next question, what actions or operations you consider as best practices when coming to Kubernetes? So these are few best practices, like always, we need to make sure Kubernetes YAML files are valid. This can be achieved by applying some automated checks, like some kind of linting tools that can be integrated into pipelines. Always specify requests and limits to prevent situations where the containers are using the entire cluster memory, which can lead to out of memory issue. So this can be achieved via resource limits so that like we can avoid out of memory issue. Labeling is an important concept. So we can specify the label to logically group pods, deployments, etc. Use labels to identify the type of application, for example, among other things. So this is just like a naming or tagging convention. Using labels, we can segregate into logical groups. So that's on the part one. I hope you like the content. If you like the content, just hit on the subscribe button. So this is our channel name, DevOps Motivation. And then thank you. See you in the next part.